The damn cigarette tasted like burnt dreams and regret. Lucky Strikes were supposed to be my small rebellion, a middle finger to the shit life kept throwing my way. Mom and Dad gone when I was barely out of pigtails. Then the Parkers, bless their hearts, taking me in, filling the hole, only to be ripped away by some drunk driver when I was on the cusp of 18. 18 and alone. Again, the Parkers, dear, sweet Mr. and Miss S. Parker left me their house, a rambling Victorian with creaky floors and sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. It was a haven, a sanctuary built on their love, but it was also a mausoleum. Every room echoed with their laughter, their quiet conversations, their unwavering affection. I couldn't stay, so I sold it. That money, though, was a lifeline, a ticket to a city apartment and a financial management degree. It was a practical choice, a way to claw my way out of the wreckage. Numbers, balance sheets, market trends, they made sense, unlike the chaotic mess of my emotions. The city was a concrete jungle, a million lives colliding, yet the silence in my small apartment was deafening. Days were a blur of lectures, late-night study sessions, and the relentless pursuit of a future I couldn't quite picture. Nights were a battle against the loneliness, a constant struggle to fill the void. Then I met Liam at Sarah's ridiculously loud birthday party, overflowing with cheap beer and deafening music. He was a force, all boisterous laughter and unapologetic charm. He knocked into me, sending my beer splashing down my shirt. Wah! My bad! Seriously, so sorry. Let me get you another one. He was already waving down Sarah's boyfriend, Ben, who was struggling to keep the makeshift bar stocked. It's fine, I muttered, dabbing at the stain with a cocktail napkin. Just a beer. Just a beer? On your birthday? Unacceptable. 2 beers, Ben. Stat, he grinned, completely unbothered by my initial irritation. That grin, it melted something inside me. His name was Liam. He was a carpenter, a builder of things, a complete contrast to my world of numbers and spreadsheets. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. His stories were vivid, full of sawdust and sunshine. He made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in I don't even know how long. We discovered shared loves, classic films, cheesy 80s music, dogs, though I did try to keep my past, the constant rehoming of my life at bay, and a mutual hatred for olives. It was easy. Too easy, maybe. A year later, we were curled up on my couch, watching some old black and white movie. Liam fumbled in his pocket, pulled out a ring box, and mumbled, "Marry me?" He was squeezing the box so hard I thought he'd crush the velvet. I laughed, a shaky, relieved sound. It was so him. No grand gestures, no romantic speeches, just raw, unfiltered Liam. Yes, I managed, tears stinging my eyes. Yes, you big goof. Marriage didn't change much at first. We still lived in my small apartment, still argued over whose turn it was to do the dishes, still stayed up late watching movies and eating pizza. But there was a solidity to it, a sense of belonging I'd never known. I was tethered to something, someone, in a way I never thought possible. Then came the curveball. Life, as always, had other plans. Liam's parents, Henry and Eleanor, were the salt of the earth. Their cozy suburban home was filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and the sound of Eleanor's gentle humming. They welcomed me with open arms, their warmth a balm to my perpetually aching heart. "So happy you're part of our family now, Darcy," Eleanor would say, squeezing my hand with genuine affection. "You're a godsend for our boy." "Thank you," I'd reply, feeling a surge of gratitude. They filled another void, a missing piece I hadn't even realized was there. Weekends at their house became our ritual, backyard barbecues, lazy afternoons reading in the sun, and endless cups of coffee shared over stories and laughter. Henry, a retired teacher, always had a book recommendation or a fascinating anecdote. Eleanor, a gifted gardener, taught me the names of flowers and the secret language of herbs. It was idyllic. Then Liam got the call. A year-long assignment out of state. A huge opportunity to advance his career. It was a no-brainer professionally. Personally, it felt like a punch to the gut. Almost as soon as Liam left, Henry's health took a nosedive. He'd been slowing down for a while, but one morning, Eleanor called, her voice trembling. "Darcy, honey, I don't know what to do. Henry, he's really not well. I can't manage on my own." Without hesitation, I packed a bag and drove out to their house. Seeing Henry so frail, hooked up to machines, was a shock. This man, who had always been a tower of strength, was now diminished, vulnerable. I slipped into the role of caregiver easily. Cooking, cleaning, running errands, anything to ease Eleanor's burden. In the evenings, I'd sit by Henry's bedside, reading aloud from his favorite books. His eyes would often flutter closed, but I knew he was listening, finding solace in the familiar words. "Thank you, Darcy," he'd whisper on good days, his voice a mere shadow of its former self. "You're a blessing." "It's my pleasure, Henry," I'd reply, squeezing his hand. "I'm happy to help." One afternoon, Eleanor sat down at the kitchen table while I was prepping dinner. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed. "Darcy, I don't know how to say this," she began, twisting a tissue in her hands. "We're in a bit of a bind, financially. Henry was the main earner, you know, and with him like this," I put down the knife, giving her my full attention. "We're strapped, honey. I hate to even ask, but could you consider renting out your apartment? It might help us get through this." Her gaze was fixed on the table, and she looked mortified. My apartment, my safe haven, my last tangible link to my independence. But looking at Eleanor's desperate face, I couldn't say no. "Of course, Eleanor," I said firmly. "I'll get on it right away." The apartment rented quickly, and every month, I dutifully transferred the rental income to Eleanor, along with money for groceries and bills. The commute to my job downtown became a grueling marathon, but I told myself it was worth it. Family sticks together, right? "Darcy, you're a godsend," Eleanor would say, her relief palpable each time I handed her the money. "It's what family does," I'd reply. But some nights, as I lay in the spare room listening to the distant sirens of the city, I felt a gnawing unease. The weight of responsibility was crushing. Liam's calls were my only respite, his voice a lifeline to another life. "How's it going, Dark? You holding up okay?" His concern was always evident. "We're managing." I'd force a cheerful tone. "Don't worry about us." I didn't want to add to his burden. But the truth was, I was starting to crack. Then she arrived. Brenda, Eleanor's daughter from her first marriage, Liam's half-sister. I'd met her a handful of times over the years, each encounter leaving me feeling unsettled. There was something cold and calculating about her, a sharpness that made my skin crawl. Her arrival at the Harper household felt like a storm rolling in. The air thickened, the temperature dropped. She moved in with the ease of someone reclaiming what was rightfully theirs, surveying the house with a critical eye. My days were already stretched thin, juggling my demanding job, the relentless commute, and the increasing demands of Henry's care. Brenda's presence added a whole new layer of stress. It was clear she wasn't there to help. She was there to take. One evening, after a particularly brutal day, Henry beckoned me closer, his grip surprisingly strong. His voice was a raspy whisper. "Darcy, you need to be careful around Brenda. She's not who she seems. She's a snake." I leaned in, the intensity in his eyes sending a shiver down my spine. "I understand, Henry," I promised, though I didn't know exactly what I was promising against. Henry's warning proved chillingly accurate. Brenda wasted no time establishing her dominance. The first sign was when I found her in the kitchen, early one morning, sipping coffee and radiating disapproval. "Just so we're clear," she announced, her voice as brittle as ice, "I'm not here to play housemate or cook for anyone." I swallowed my irritation, trying to keep the peace. Okay, Brenda. I've been handling things so far, and I can continue to do so. Good, she snapped. Because I don't plan on lifting a finger. This is Mom's house, after all. From that day on, Brenda made her presence felt in the most insidious ways. She'd order takeout just for herself and Eleanor, leaving the empty containers for me to clean up. She'd leave her clothes scattered around the house, expecting me to pick them up. Her disdain was palpable. Darcy, why don't you sit and eat with us tonight? Eleanor asked one evening, a rare glimmer of the old warmth in her voice. Before I could answer, Brenda cut in, her voice dripping with false concern. Mom, Darcy's been so busy all day. She probably prefers eating later. The message was clear, I wasn't welcome. The days grew heavier, my chores doubled. Brenda's entitlement permeated every corner of the house. I could hear her late at night, whispering with Eleanor, poisoning her mind against me. Eleanor, once so kind and understanding, began to change. Her smiles grew fainter, her thank yous fewer. A couple of weeks later, Henry passed away. The funeral was a blur of grief and forced civility. Liam flew in just in time to say goodbye. Having him by my side was a comfort, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Brenda was on her best behavior, showering everyone with saccharine sweetness. But beneath the surface, I saw a glint of something else. Triumph, perhaps? How's everything been while I've been gone? Liam asked me quietly, during a brief moment alone after the funeral. Fine. Everything's been fine, I lied, forcing a smile. I didn't want to burden him with the truth. Not now. You sure? You look a bit worn out. He studied my face, his brow furrowed with concern. It's just been busy, you know. Helping out around here, I reassured him, avoiding his gaze. It wasn't the time to delve into the festering mess that was brewing beneath the surface. As soon as Liam left, Brenda dropped the act. The mask of the dutiful daughter was gone, replaced by the sneering, dismissive attitude I'd grown accustomed to. The dynamic in the house shifted drastically. Eleanor, perhaps consumed by her own grief, became distant and cold towards me. Commands replaced conversations, and I felt more like an unwelcome guest than a member of the family. Brenda took over the household with ruthless efficiency, turning it into her personal fiefdom. She started barging into my room without knocking, rummaging through my things as if she were searching for something. One afternoon, I was out in the garden trying to find a moment of peace, when I stumbled upon a cardboard box hidden amongst the rose bushes. Curiosity piqued. I opened it. My blood ran cold. Inside, piled haphazardly, were my watches, my jewelry, even some of my underwear. Scattered nearby were several of my dresses, tossed carelessly over a hedge. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through me. I gathered my belongings, clutching the box tightly, and stormed inside. I found Brenda in the living room, lounging on the couch, flipping through a magazine. What the hell, Brenda? I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. You can't just throw my stuff out here. What the hell is wrong with you? Brenda laughed, a cold, harsh sound that echoed mockingly around the room. Who cares where I put this junk? You act like you actually live here. Please! You're just a guest, and an unwelcome one at that. You should be out tending the garden like Cinderella. Or better yet, out on the street where you belong. You're nothing but a poor beggar anyway. Her words hit me like a physical blow. The venom in her voice was shocking, but I can't say I was surprised. Brenda was a bully, and nothing would ever be enough for her. Trembling, I turned to Eleanor, who had just entered the room. Eleanor, tell her she can't treat me like this. This is supposed to be my home, too, I pleaded, my voice cracking with desperation. Eleanor, once so kind and gentle, now looked at me as if I were invisible. Her face was cold. Brenda's right, Darcy. This is Brenda's house now, and it is my house. Maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live. Her words were a punch to the gut, but I could have dealt with it better if they hadn't come from her, Eleanor. Eleanor, who I cared for. Eleanor, who had said I was a daughter to her. I stood there, the box clutched in my hands, my heart shattering into a million pieces. The home I thought I had found, the family I thought I belonged to, had crumbled around me in an instant. Despite the betrayal, despite the humiliation, I stayed. I stayed because of a promise I had made to Henry on his deathbed, to look after Eleanor, to protect her from Brenda's influence. I stayed because I still clung to the hope that the Eleanor I knew, the kind, loving woman, was still there, buried beneath the layers of grief and Brenda's manipulation. But day by day, Eleanor seemed to adopt Brenda's cruel traits. Her words grew sharper, her eyes colder. "You're just sitting on your hands, aren't you?" Eleanor snapped one evening as I cleaned up after dinner, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm doing my best to keep things running smoothly," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hurt her words caused. "Best? Could have fooled me. Seems like you're just freeloading," she scoffed, turning her back to me as she left the room. Freeloading. The word echoed in my head, a cruel mockery of my efforts. I was far from a freeloader. I had rented out my apartment and funneled nearly all the income to Eleanor, on top of handling most of the housework while Brenda did nothing but criticize. Brenda, of course, never missed an opportunity to remind me of my supposed worthlessness. "Really, what did my brother even see in you?" She'd taunt me nightly, her voice loud enough to carry through the thin walls. I'd bite my tongue, swallow the anger and frustration, and remind myself of the promise I had made. But the atmosphere in the house was suffocating, a minefield of hostility and resentment. One evening, I came home early from work, exhausted and emotionally drained. As I stepped inside, I heard Brenda and Eleanor in the middle of a heated discussion in the living room. They didn't notice my arrival. "We need to get her to sell that apartment of hers," Brenda was saying, her voice dripping with greed. "You know how much we could use that money?" "Yes, but how do we convince her?" "Darcy's no fool. She won't just hand it over," Eleanor replied, her voice a mixture of frustration and guilt. "Leave it to me, Mom," Brenda said, her voice smooth and seductive. "I'll sweet-talk her into it. Once she signs it over, we can finally live the way we deserve. We need to get you out of this hole." Brenda's words slithered through the air like a snake, chilling me to the bone. Hearing them plot to strip me of my only financial security was a slap in the face. Eleanor knew what this meant. Fear gripped me. I couldn't stay, not anymore. I wouldn't let them do this to me. My heart pounding, I slipped away to my room, unnoticed. They were planning to rob me of everything, to leave me with nothing. The decision was made. I was getting out of here. Now. Hurriedly, I packed my essentials, a few changes of clothes, my laptop, some photos of Mom and Dad, the Parkers and Liam. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely zip up my bag. Every second spent in that house now felt like a countdown to disaster. I didn't bother with goodbyes. They didn't deserve them. They had chosen their side, and it wasn't with me. Slipping out the back door, I ordered a taxi to the train station. As the train pulled away from the platform, leaving the suburbs behind, doubts swirled in my mind. Would Liam understand? Would he believe me? Would he take their side? The uncertainty was crushing, but the fear of what might happen if I stayed was worse. I stared out the window, watching the landscape blur by, a mix of fear and resolve churning in my stomach. When I arrived at Liam's place, his reaction was a cocktail of shock, relief, and a whirlwind of questions. His eyes widened as he opened the door to find me standing there, bag in hand, looking, probably as frazzled as I felt. "Darcy? What are you doing here?" "Is everything okay?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. I hesitated, taking in the familiar, comforting sight of his temporary home. "No, Liam. Everything's not okay." "Not at all," I replied, my voice catching in my throat. He led me to the couch, his expression now lined with worry. "Talk to me, babe." "What happened?" I told him everything. Starting from Brenda's arrival, the worsening conditions at home, the financial manipulations, and the final, gut-wrenching revelation, their plot to make me sell my apartment. I hadn't wanted to worry him before, didn't want to add to his stress while he was away working. That had been my mistake. Liam's face darkened with every word I spoke. By the time I finished, his fists were clenched, his jaw set hard. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" he asked, his voice a mixture of anger and concern. "I didn't want to cause more trouble. I thought I could handle it," I admitted, feeling foolish now. "Darcy, damn it. You shouldn't have to handle anything like that alone," he exploded, standing up to pace the room. "I can't believe my mom and Brenda would treat you this way." He stopped and looked at me, his eyes blazing with anger. "I'm not letting anyone treat my wife like that. No way." He grabbed his cell phone from the table and quickly dialed a number. I watched, heart pounding, as he held the phone to his ear. I recognized the ringtone for the number. That was Eleanor. The phone barely rang twice before she picked up. I couldn't hear Eleanor's words, but the stiffness in Liam's shoulders told me everything I needed to know. "Mom, this has to stop. I know about everything and I won't tolerate it. If Brenda doesn't leave, and if you don't start treating Darcy with respect, you can forget about us helping out anymore. No more money. No more nothing." Liam's voice was steel, leaving no room for argument. There was a brief, fiery exchange, then silence. Liam's hand tightened around the phone. "Fine. If that's your choice, then you've made mine," he said finally, and hung up. He turned to look at me, his expression softening. "Looks like it's just us now, babe," he said, coming over to wrap me in his arms. "And that's all we need." I leaned into him, the safety of his embrace fortifying me against the whirlwind of emotions raging inside me. "Just us," I murmured, feeling the truth of his words sink in. We were on our own now, but somehow that felt okay, safe. Liam and I talked long into the night. We discussed practical things, like my remote work arrangements and our financial plans. Without the extra strain of supporting Eleanor and Brenda, things suddenly felt much less dire. It felt like we were laying the foundations for a new chapter, a chapter built on trust, honesty, and unwavering love. Whatever happens, we're in this together. "You and me against the world, right?" Liam said with a determined grin. "Right," I smiled back, feeling more confident with him by my side. "Against the world. Together." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I contacted my office and arranged to work remotely, which, thankfully, they approved. Liam helped me move my belongings from storage and set up a makeshift home office in the corner of his living room. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and it was peaceful. A week into our newfound peace, I was jolted by a call, almost like a ghost from a past life. It was Eleanor. Her voice, once so sweet and reassuring, now dripped with a mix of desperation and a strange, almost childlike audacity. "Darcy, why haven't I received the money for this month?" "You know we depend on it," she demanded right off the bat. I was stunned silent for a moment, her nerve unbelievable. "I'm sorry, Eleanor, but after everything, you really expect me to continue supporting you?" I asked, my tone more incredulous than angry. In the background, I could hear Brenda's voice, shrill and furious. "She's just an ungrateful bitch, Mom. Make her transfer the money." Taking a deep breath to calm my rising anger, I reminded myself of the venomous words they had thrown at me, the betrayal, the humiliation. "Eleanor," Brenda called me a poor beggar, remember? "I'm not sending money to people who treat me like trash. I'm done." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost picture Eleanor's shocked face. "But we're family," she finally said, her voice a mixture of anger and pleading. "No, Eleanor. Family doesn't treat each other that way. Goodbye," I said firmly, and hung up before she could respond. The call shook me, but Liam was right there, his support unwavering. "You did the right thing, Darcy. It's time they learned to stand on their own," he reassured me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Not long after settling into our new routine, another surprise came our way. I was pregnant. The news hit us like a ton of bricks, knocking the wind out of both of us, and we ended up just laughing. Not that that wasn't the plan. Kids had always been the plan. But after all the darkness, the betrayal and hurt, this was the most beautiful ray of light. The thought of bringing a new life into the world, a life filled with love and security, was both terrifying and exhilarating. Suddenly, the future seemed filled with possibilities. We decided it was time to sell my apartment and buy a small house in the suburbs, a place with a yard and a good school district, where our child could grow up surrounded by love and opportunities. As we were finalizing our moving plans, another call came. Again, it was Eleanor, but her tone was different this time, desperate, almost pitiful. "Darcy, I've made a terrible mistake," she sobbed, her voice broken. "Brenda forced me to sell the house, took all the money, and she left. She left me with nothing. Can I come and live with you and Liam? I have nowhere else to go." The request stunned me. After everything, after the pain and suffering she had inflicted, she expected me to take her in? This was a true test of my resolve. "Eleanor, you chose this path," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You chose to side with Brenda against us. You had the power to make a different choice." I know, she wailed. "I've made so many mistakes, but you have such a kind heart, Darcy. Can't you find it in yourself to forgive an old woman for her wrong choices?" I sighed, feeling a pang of pity, but remembering the deep wounds her choices had inflicted. "I forgave you long ago, Eleanor, but that doesn't mean I can let you back into my life. You need to live with the consequences of your actions, just as I have." And with that, I ended the call. Then, with a resolute tap, I blocked her number. We moved forward with our plans, purchasing a quaint little house with a small garden and a swing set in the backyard. It wasn't much, but it was ours. It was a lazy Sunday morning, the kind where you linger over coffee and the newspaper, soaking up the warmth of the sun streaming through the windows. I was idly flipping through the pages when a headline caught my eye. "Local woman arrested for massive fraud scheme." There, staring back at me from the front page, was Brenda, handcuffed and looking utterly defeated. A strange mix of shock and, admittedly, a slight sense of vindication washed over me. "Liam, look at this," I called out, holding up the newspaper for him to see. "It's Brenda. She's been arrested for fraud." Liam took the newspaper, scanning the article with a serious expression. "Wow. Can't say I'm surprised, but still, it's a lot to take in." "Yeah, it is. But she made her choices, and now she's facing the consequences," I replied, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The news eventually trickled back to us through mutual acquaintances that Eleanor was living in a small, run-down apartment, working 2 minimum wage jobs to scrape by. Her pension wasn't enough to cover her living expenses and pay off the debts Brenda had left her with. "Did you hear about your mom?" One of Liam's friends, Matt, brought it up one evening when they were over for a backyard barbecue. "Yeah, I heard," Liam responded, flipping burgers on the grill. His voice held a trace of sadness, but it was tempered with resolve. "She chose her path, Matt. It's tough, but that's how it is." Matt nodded, understanding the unspoken boundaries. "You're right, man. Just thought you should know." The conversation shifted after that, the evening air filled with lighter topics of sports, work, and the upcoming birth of our child. Life had moved on, and so had we. The joy of our new life truly crystallized when our daughter, Mia, came into the world. Becoming parents changed everything. It shifted our priorities, our dreams, and even healed some of the old wounds, filling them with a new, overwhelming love. "Can you believe she's ours?" I whispered to Liam one night as we watched Mia sleeping peacefully in her crib. "She's perfect, Darcy. Just perfect," Liam murmured back, his voice thick with emotion. We spent our days marveling at each little milestone Mia achieved, Each smile, each giggle, each clumsy step. She was our little miracle, and with her, the hardships of the past seemed to recede further and further into the distance, making room for new memories, better ones. Each day was simple, but filled with small moments of joy that stitched together a beautiful tapestry of family life. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had lost its power to define us. We had built a new life, a life founded on love, trust, and the unwavering commitment to stand by each other, no matter what challenges came our way. We were a family, finally, and we were home. Years passed. Mia grew into a spirited, bright young girl, her laughter echoing through the halls of our now slightly larger, but still cozy suburban home. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. My career flourished, Liam's carpentry business thrived, and Mia excelled in school. We were, by all accounts, a success story. But the past, like a persistent echo, still lingered in the shadows. I hadn't heard from Eleanor in all those years. Not a card, not a call, not even a message through mutual acquaintances. I often wondered about her, imagined her life, her regrets. Part of me hoped she had found some semblance of peace, some way to reconcile with her choices. Another part of me held on to the anger, the resentment, the hurt. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, as I was picking Mia up from soccer practice, a familiar figure caught my eye. An older woman, her back stooped, her clothes worn and faded, stood hesitantly near the entrance to the park. Her hair, once a vibrant auburn, was now streaked with gray and pulled back in a tight, unflattering bun. It took me a moment to register who it was. Eleanor! My heart lurched, my breath caught in my throat. A flood of conflicting emotions washed over me. Shock, anger, pity. A flicker of something akin to affection? Mia, oblivious to the drama unfolding, tugged on my sleeve. Mom, can we get ice cream? In a minute, sweetie, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Eleanor spotted me, her eyes widening in recognition. She hesitated for a moment, then took a tentative step forward. Darcy? She said, her voice raspy and uncertain. I stood frozen, unsure what to do, what to say. The years had been unkind to her. She looked frail, defeated. Eleanor, I replied, my voice carefully neutral. I saw you, she stammered, her eyes darting between me and Mia. I saw you with your daughter. She's beautiful. Thank you, I said stiffly. An awkward silence descended, broken only by the shouts and laughter of the children playing in the park. Mia, growing impatient, tugged on my sleeve again. Mom, can we go now? I'm hungry. Yes, honey. Just a minute, I said, turning my attention back to Eleanor. What do you want, Eleanor? Why are you here? She wrung her hands nervously. I just wanted to see you, to see how you were doing, to say I'm sorry. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken regrets. I searched her face, trying to gauge the sincerity of her apology. Sorry for what, Eleanor? For stealing my money? For throwing me out on the street? For believing Brenda's lies? The words tumbled out of my mouth, fueled by years of suppressed anger. I know, she said, her voice trembling. I did terrible things. I was blinded by grief, by Brenda's influence. I let her manipulate me, and I hurt you terribly. I'll never forgive myself for that. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she reached out a trembling hand to touch my arm. I instinctively recoiled. Don't, I said sharply. Don't touch me. She dropped her hand, her face crumpling with shame. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said softly. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm proud of you. You built a good life for yourself. You deserve all the happiness you have. She paused, taking a deep breath. I should go, she said quietly. I didn't mean to upset you. She turned to walk away, her shoulders slumped with defeat. I watched her go, a turmoil of emotions raging inside me. Mom, Who was that? Mia asked, her curiosity piqued. Just someone I used to know, I replied, my voice strained. As we drove to the ice cream shop, I couldn't shake the image of Eleanor from my mind. She looked so lost, so alone. Part of me wanted to reach out, to offer her some kind of comfort, some kind of help. But another part of me, the part that still felt the sting of betrayal, couldn't bring myself to do it. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. Eleanor's face haunted my dreams. Her apology, whether genuine or not, had stirred up a hornet's nest of emotions. I tossed and turned, wrestling with my conscience. Had I been too harsh? Too unforgiving? Was I justified in holding on to so much anger after all these years? Liam, sensing my unease, reached out and took my hand. "What's wrong, Dark?" he asked softly. I told him about seeing Eleanor, about her apology, about the conflicting emotions it had stirred up inside me. He listened patiently, his hand warm and reassuring. When I was finished, he said, "It's your decision, Dark. There's no right or wrong answer here. You have every right to be angry, to hold on to your resentment. She hurt you deeply, and she deserves to face the consequences of her actions." He paused, then added, "But forgiveness isn't about condoning what she did. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of anger, about letting go of the past so you can move forward." His words resonated with me. Forgiveness. It wasn't about Eleanor. It was about me. About freeing myself from the chains of anger and resentment that had bound me for so long. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity. I still wasn't ready to forgive Eleanor completely, to erase the pain she had caused. But I was ready to let go of the anger, to release the bitterness that had poisoned my soul. I knew I had to do something. After dropping Mia off at school, I drove to the address Eleanor had given me years ago, the address of the small, run-down apartment she had been living in. I parked the car a block away, took a deep breath, and walked towards the building. The neighborhood was dilapidated, the streets littered with trash. It was a far cry from the comfortable suburban life I now enjoyed. I found the apartment building, a dingy brick structure with peeling paint and broken windows. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed open the heavy, creaking door and stepped inside. The hallway smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap detergent. I found Eleanor's apartment number on the directory and climbed the narrow, rickety stairs to the third floor. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. A moment later, the door creaked open, and Eleanor stood before me, her eyes wide with surprise. "Darcy?" she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing here? Can I come in?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing me to enter. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished. A worn sofa sat against one wall, a small television perched on a rickety stand. The air was heavy with the smell of dust and loneliness. "Please, sit down," Eleanor said, gesturing towards the sofa. I sat down, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me. This was the life Eleanor had chosen, the life she was now forced to endure. "I came to say I understand," I said, my voice carefully controlled. "I understand that you were grieving, that you were vulnerable. I understand that Brenda manipulated you. That doesn't excuse your actions, but it helps me understand." Eleanor nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means so much." I took a deep breath. "I'm not ready to forgive you completely," I said firmly, "but I'm ready to let go of the anger. I'm ready to move on." I paused, then added, "I also wanted to offer you some help." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Help?" she said, her voice incredulous. "What kind of help? I know you're struggling financially," I said. "I'm not going to give you a lump sum of money, but I can help you find a better job. I have some connections, and I can help you find a safer, more affordable place to live." Eleanor stared at me, her face a mixture of shock and gratitude. "Darcy," she said, her voice choked with emotion. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "Just Let me help you. And in that moment, a small seed of forgiveness began to sprout, nurtured by compassion, understanding, and the realization that everyone, even those who have wronged us, deserves a second chance. Helping Eleanor wasn't easy. It took time, effort, and a considerable amount of patience. She was resistant at first, hesitant to accept my help. But I persevered, driven by a sense of obligation, a desire to right the wrongs of the past. I helped her update her resume, practice her interviewing skills, and connect with potential employers. I also helped her search for a safer, more affordable apartment in a better neighborhood. Slowly but surely, Eleanor began to rebuild her life. She landed a job as a receptionist at a local doctor's office, a position that offered her a decent salary and a sense of purpose. She found a small, but clean and comfortable, apartment in a quiet residential area. As she regained her independence, her confidence grew. The spark that had been extinguished by grief and manipulation began to flicker once more. One sunny afternoon, as I was visiting Eleanor in her new apartment, she turned to me and said, "Thank you, Darcy, for everything. You saved my life. You saved your own life, Eleanor," I replied, smiling. "I just gave you a little push in the right direction," she smiled back, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. "I'll never forget what you've done for me," she said softly. "You're a true friend." I hugged her tightly, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't expected. The past hadn't been erased, but it had lost its power to define us. As the years passed, Eleanor became an important part of our lives. She attended Mia's soccer games, helped with birthday parties, and became a beloved member of our extended family. The bond between us grew stronger with each passing year, forged in forgiveness, compassion, and a shared understanding of the fragility of life. Liam, initially hesitant to trust Eleanor, eventually came to accept her as well. He saw the genuine remorse in her eyes, the unwavering dedication to making amends. He recognized that forgiveness wasn't about condoning the past, but about embracing the future. And so, our story came full circle. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, all had faded into the background, replaced by love, forgiveness, and the unwavering belief in the power of second chances. We had built a family, not just through blood and marriage, but through compassion and understanding. We were home, finally, and we were whole. The ending I had always hoped for wasn't the one I had expected, but, looking back, I wouldn't have traded it for anything. It was messy, chaotic, and riddled with imperfections, but it was real. This was my life. It was my story, and I wouldn't change a thing. Years turned into decades. Mia, a young woman now, stood on the cusp of her own life, ready to embark on her own adventures. She had inherited Liam's strong hands and my sharp mind, a beautiful blend of practicality and creativity. She was about to graduate college and had been accepted into a program as a social worker. I watched her, beaming with pride, as she prepared to leave for her graduation ceremony. The sun streamed through the windows of our home, illuminating the framed photos that lined the walls, snapshots of our life, captured in time. Photos of Mia as a baby, of Liam and me on our wedding day, of Eleanor, smiling warmly, holding Mia as a toddler. Eleanor. She was gone now, too, having passed away peacefully in her sleep a few years earlier. Her presence still lingered in our home, a gentle reminder of the power of forgiveness and the enduring strength of the human spirit. "You look beautiful, Mom," Mia said, breaking my reverie. "Ready to celebrate?" "Always," I replied, smiling. As we walked towards the car, hand in hand, I glanced back at the house, a sense of gratitude washing over me. This house, these memories, this family, they were all a testament to the transformative power of love and forgiveness. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of darkness, moments of despair. But through it all, we had persevered, guided by the unwavering belief that even the deepest wounds can heal, that even the most broken hearts can mend. I thought of my parents, of the Parkers, of Henry, and of Eleanor. They were all gone, but their love, their kindness, their wisdom, it lived on in Mia, in Liam, and in me. It was a legacy of love, passed down through generations, a beacon of hope in a world often shrouded in darkness. As we drove away, heading towards Mia's graduation ceremony, I couldn't help but smile. Life, as always, had its challenges, its ups and downs. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that we could face anything together because we were a family. We were home, and we were whole. And as the sun set on another beautiful day, I whispered a silent prayer of thanks for the blessings that had been bestowed upon us, for the lessons we had learned, and for the enduring power of love to conquer all. The end.